Good morning, students. Today we will be continuing with the biomechanics of hand complex. We were doing wrist and hand complex, and I was not willing to do this hand complex, but then I thought that it might help my students for completing these muscles and their actions. So I'm posting this video on biomechanics on hand complex. Now you guys understand the hand is basically made up of the carpometacarpal joints. Then there are five metacarpophalangeal joints. Five we have the interphalangeal joints, proximal and distal. So they are basically, except for the first finger, we there is only one interphalangeal joint. Else we are having distal to the carpal bones. 19 bones are there and 19 joints are there. Fine. So we will be covering those joints today. So for the first joint is carpometacarpal joints. Now carpometacarpal joints, basically it is arising from here, carpometacarpal joints, carpals and the metacarpals. Fine, we have got five metacarpals. Now to understand carpometacarpal joints, we have basically the PPT or is certainly divided. I have divided first metacarpo, I will be taking it later on, whereas carpometacarpal joint, because it is for thumb and it has got its various importance, whereas I have taken the second to the fifth carpometacarpal joints together because its function is also together. So the from the second to the fifth metacarpophalangeal joints, we'll be talking about that. And basically these joints are a plain variety of a synovial joints, as there is only 1 degree of movement which is happening. Fine, but we can see that the movement which is taking place. Now let us see carpals, that is the head of the distal end of the carpal bones, as well as the head of the head of the metacarpals and the distal end of the carpal bones. Now what are the distal end of the carpal bones is? The distal end is the trapezium, trapezoid, capitate and hamate. There is the distal row, this is the distal row, and the head of the metacarpals. They basically form the carpometacarpal joints. Now for the second, for the third, for the fourth and for the fifth, this is the motion, or this is the joint which is there. Now this is basically a plain variety of a joint. That means it allows a degree of motion, that is it allows flexion to extension. This is the movement which is motion which is allowed at this joint, carpometacarpal joints. And if you can see, it is this carpal bones, they are moving on the head of the metacarpals. Fine. And since this is a very narrow area is there, so it has been superimposed by deep transverse metacarpal ligament. Transverse means crossing like this, so deep metacarpals transverse ligament. So it is basically covered, it covers the second to the fourth metacarpal, and they basically hold this heads together, or hold this joints together. And of course there is intercarpal ligaments also which hold them together. So they are basically being holded by these two ligaments, as well as the deep there are three ligaments basically. The deep transverse metacarpal ligaments is there, then there is intercarpal ligaments is there, and then there is also another ligament which is holding is transverse carpal ligament. So there is intercarpal ligaments, transverse carpal ligaments, as well as the deep transverse metacarpal ligaments. So they are transverse ligament which are holding the CMC joint together. Fine, let us see the articulation. And the second carpometacarpal joint is formed between the head of the second MC as well as the trapezoid. The trapezium is taking part in the first MC, that is for the first CMC joint. So the second one is basically part of trapezium and trapezoid carpal bone. Takes part in the as a distal articular surface. The proximal is formed by the head of the second metacarpal. For the third metacarpophalangeal joint, it is formed from the head of the third metacarpal along with the trapezium and capitate. Along with the trapezium and capitate. So the fourth metacarpal is formed from the head of the fourth metacarpal and the capitate bone itself, and capitate and partial part of the hamate, whereas the fifth one is only articulating with the hamate bone. So hamate and the fifth metacarpal head. So if I can explain it again, the first one is the first carpometacarpal joint is formed between the trapezium and the head of the first metacarpal. The second is formed between the trapezium and trapezoid and the second metacarpal head. The third is formed between the capitate and the third metacarpal head. Sometimes it is in some books they have given a reference that a part of trapezium is also taking part in it, but in some books they are saying that the third metacarpal being in the middle segment, they form the middle segment of the wrist and hand, and in this they only say that only in the third metacarpal only capitate bone is articulating, but in some books, so there is some kind of a variation. So you can write trapezium as well as the capitate bone. For the fourth, it is capitate and hamate and the fourth metacarpal head, and for the fifth, it is only hamate which is acting along with the fifth metacarpal head. So these are the articular surfaces for the carpometacarpal joints. It has been supported by a deep transverse metacarpal ligament as well as intercarpal ligaments, and I told there is another which is called as deep transverse carpal ligament. So these are the three ligaments which contribute to the stability of it, and they are responsible for basically movement at the these ligaments which I have already told you. They are basically forming a carpal tunnel, and these ligaments form carpal tunnel, and under which 9 flexor tendons of the wrist and the hand, they are passing along with the median nerve. So you know that median nerve pathology which happens. Fine. So this is the transverse carpal ligament and the medial nerve crossing through it. Now, what are the range of motion? Now, since I told you it is a plain variety of a synovial joint, so the movement which is allowing is there is flexion to extension movement. Okay? There is flexion to extension movement which is there, and there is abduction to adduction movement also there. For the flexion to extension movement, the flexion movement increases from the second to the fifth carpometacarpal joints. From the second to the fifth carpometacarpal joints. That means the flexion is 90 degree at the second from the second carpometacarpal joints, and this basically increases from the radial side to the ulnar side, and it goes up to 110 degree. So there is an increase in the flexion movement which is happening. Fine. So you can say, if you cannot write so much in detail, you can also write that it allows 2 degree of motion. 1 degree is flexion and extension motion. So if I can say second, third and fourth, they are basically a plain variety of a synovial joint which allows only flexion to extension motion, whereas the fifth carpometacarpal joint is basically a saddle variety of a joint which also allows flexion, extension and abduction and adduction motion. So this motion is there for us to grab a thing, for us to hold a position. So this movement is easy done because the last fifth metacarpal also does this little bit of abduction to adduction movement. So as simple as it can be, second, third and fourth is a plain variety of a synovial joint which allows only 1 degree of freedom of movement, that is flexion to extension, whereas fifth variety is a saddle variety along with the first and fifth are saddle variety of a joint. And I will be talking first about the first carpometacarpal joint separately because its ligaments are different and every function is also different. So the fifth carpometacarpal joint is a saddle variety of a joint which allows flexion to extension, and there is abduction to adduction movement also there, and which allows us to for gripping activity. Now there is the next topic is about the palmar arches. Now since I told you about the deep transverse, so you understand the distal carpal bone. This is a distal carpal bone. The distal carpal bone forms the distal transverse arch. This is the distal transverse arch. This is the proximal transverse arch. These basically arches, and the arch which has been formed, from the second and the third, taking into account the second and the third rays of the hand, forms the longitudinal arch. Now these arches, why they are important is they are responsible for the hand function, that is a hand function of grasp, precisions, different kind of grasp can be done, conical, spherical, cylindrical, all these grasp can be easily done, 3-point chuck position, lateral tip, the position or the different the hand can take the shape of the object it is holding. So this is only possible with the help of these palmar arches. So we have got two transverse arches, the distal transverse arch which has been formed by the distal row of the carpal row. Fine, the distal carpal row and the head of the distal carpal row and the head of the first carpometacarpal joints. Distal carpal row and the head of the carpometacarpal joints, they all form this the distal transverse arch, and they are this distal arch is very mobile. This is very mobile, whereas the proximal transverse arch, it is formed by the base of the if I can say, if this is the head, this is the body, and this will be the base of the metacarpal bones. So this is relatively not mobile. This form is not relatively mobile, this is mobile. So it helps in collapsing, or it helps in making fist. Different shapes can be easily made because distal transverse arch is mobile as compared to the proximal transverse arch. The longitudinal arch also helps us to hold an object. Fine. So you can see this through this picture, the distal and the proximal transverse arches and the longitudinal arches. Okay. So this is basically used for different shapes. And now let's come to the next part, is called as the metacarpophalangeal joints of finger. Now if we come to this part, this is the metacarpophalangeal joints. Now you can see that the base or the head of the metacarpal and the base of the proximal phalanx, they form the joint. Fine, they are forming the joint. There are 5 you can see are there. Now they are convex metacarpal head proximally with the concave base of the first distal phalanx. It's a condylar variety of a joint which allows 2 degrees of freedom, that is flexion, extension and abduction to adduction, and this motion is taking place over here. But remember, it is an incongruent joint. Why so? Because the head of the metacarpal is really large and the base is very small. So it is a very incongruent joint. So it has been supported by various accessory structures. It's joint capsule. There are various ligaments which are supporting this, because the chances of moving, because it's a totally incongruent joint. So but if it is incongruent joint, so its mobility is more, you understand that. So it has been supported by the capsule is lax so that it allows the mobility, and secondly it has been supported by the radial and the on the ulnar side the collateral ligaments. Lateral and ulnar side the collateral ligaments. They are basically divided into 2, the proper collateral ligaments and the accessory collateral ligaments, and they basically hold or give mediolateral stability to the joint, that is metacarpophalangeal joint. And there is also some volar plates which are being they are placed. These are the volar plates. Can you see in green color? These are volar plates which are present over here, so that to secure this metacarpophalangeal joints during movements. So there is another accessory structures other than the collateral. There is a collateral ligament, there is volar plates, and then there is also transverse metacarpal ligament. There was transverse, again here carpal ligament over here, and here there is transverse metacarpal ligament is also here, which is also helping and giving stability to this joint. So there are again 3 ligaments or 3 important structures: collateral ligament, transverse metacarpal ligament, and the volar plates. Fine. Now let us see what are these volar plates. They are basically palmar plates. These are basically palmar plates, and they are placed at the metacarpophalangeal joint. Now these are basically fibro sheaths fibrous sheets are there, and which is preventing the hyperextension. What happens is, since the head is large and the base of the phalanx is very small, the chances of hyperextension and or dislocation is very high. So they have been checked by the volar plates, and they are very much responsible for our longitudinal arches also. Fine. So it is a fibrocartilaginous structure which is attached. How these volar plates are basically attached? They are attached from the proximal phalanx, and they basically become very thin. They are very thick at the proximal phalanx, and they become very thin, and they get attached to the joint capsule. So basically it is not attached to the carpometacarpal joints. They are fibrocartilaginous structures which arises from, if I can show you, they arises from the proximal phalanx, and they are basically these structure, and which go and join with the membrane or the fibrous capsule of the joint. Fine. So it plays a very crucial role, and it prevents the MCP or the extension. It is responsible for the joint stability during range of motion. Fine. Now it has got other roles also. Now it is basically, it resists all the kind of tensile stresses or compressive forces. It gives resistance to all the tensile and compressive forces, which and basically protects the head, MC heads. What are these forces? When these forces can be there, when the hand is gripping something, that is a glass, a bottle, there is some kind of a tensile and compressive forces which acts on these joints. So it protects the joints, MC joint, basic MC heads. It is protecting. Secondly, it allows basically passage of FDS and FDB, flexor tendons, at the MCP joint. Now you understand, we have got flexor tendons which are running through. So it prevents pinching. How it prevents it? It basically moves upward, and then if this tendon is contracting, volar plates basically move upwards when they go into flexion. So what will happen is, it prevents the pinching of flexor tendon when they are crossing the FDS and FDP are crossing the fingers. Fine. So it is also connected with the deep transverse metacarpal ligament, and it is connected with extensor hood. There will be an extensor hood. I want to show it later on, but now I am showing, this is the extensor hood which is going, and this is the blue portion is the extensor hood, and this extensor hood is connected with you can see this volar plate through lateral sagittal bands. These are called sagittal bands, which helps the volar plates is also holding the extensor hood. So what is the function of this volar plates? One, it prevents the hyperextension of at the MCP joint, that is metacarpophalangeal joint, and it avoid pinching of the flexor tendon when it is flexed. So it is allowing that also. It is holding the extensor hood through the sagittal plates and the lateral plates, and it is also connected with the deep transverse metacarpal ligament. So it is providing all kind of stability. So you can understand, because it is an incongruent joint, so volar plates, transverse metacarpal joints, transverse metacarpal ligament, volar plates are playing a very crucial role in getting the stability of the MCP or metacarpophalangeal joint. So in this picture you can see for yourself, these are the volar plates. I want to show you like this. Can you see? This is the volar plate. Fine. This is the volar plate. This is the volar plate, and then this is the two. You can see the structures here. There are two structures here. These are basically collateral ligaments. That is, it is on both the sides. Can you see over here? This is the proper and this is the accessory one. These are two collateral ligaments which are giving, which is on both the sides, on the ulnar side as well as for the radial side. These are two collateral ligaments, and there is a volar plate, and then there is a deep transverse. If this is the structure, then this is the deep transverse metacarpal ligament. So these are the three structures which are holding the carpometacarpal joint. Fine. Now Now the collateral, as I have explained you, so they help in basically what are the collaterals doing. So it help us in abduction to adduction movement. So they play a very crucial role when the MCP goes into abduction or adduction movements. Okay, so it plays a very crucial role. Let us now understand the range of motion. Now the range of motion, as I told you, is flexion to extension. It increases from the radially to ulnar side, from the radial side to ulnar side. It is round about 90 degree at index finger, and the little finger it is 110 degree. So you can see the flexion movement is increasing from 90 to 110 degree. Fine. So this is the range of motion of flexion which is happening. Now what it is opposite is also there, that is in abduction to adduction, the range of motion is increasing from the ulnar side to the radial side. From the ulnar side to the radial side, this is the abduction to adduction movement which is happening. Fine. So this is abduction to adduction movement which is happening, and basically this is the motion. When we do this, basically I am doing this, these are the work of interosseous, but this is also moving, so they are also moving along. So pure movement can be, you can make a fist and you can relax, you can make a fist, you can see there is a distance has increased and distance has decreased. So ideally to look isolate it only at this joint, it is very difficult, but yes, there is abduction to adduction movement which is happening over here, which is more on the second metacarpophalangeal joint as compared to the fifth one. Fine. So the abduction movement is more over here. Now let's come to the interphalangeal joints. Now interphalangeal joint, as you can understand, is formed from the head of the proximal phalanx and the base of the distal IP joint. Fine. And it is a true synovial joint. It allows only 1 degree of movement, that is flexion to extension movement. So it is also got a joint capsule, it has got a volar plate, but it doesn't have, it has got a collateral ligaments, but there is no transverse carpal ligaments or transverse metacarpal ligament. No transverse ligament is there. So everything is same what is there at the metacarpophalangeal joint, but except for the transverse ligament. So this is, it is having a joint capsule, it is having a volar plate, it is also having a collateral, both side collateral ligaments to hold, but it is this is basically there is no transverse ligament over here. Again, its function is to prevent hyperextension at IP joint, and it is also, its function of this volar plate is again over here is the passage of the F flexor tendon properly without any bowstringing as well as without any pinching movement, and it also allows dissipation of forces when the hand is doing a function of grasp. So dissipation of forces is also, they're protecting from the joint tensile and compressive forces. So now if we see for the function, so IP joint has got only one function of flexion to extension. Fine. And this movement is, the range is more in the, if you can see, the range of IP joint increases ulnarly, that is on the fifth IP joint is more, there's a flexion range is more. Normal it is 80 to 90 degree, whereas 80 to 90 degree at the PIP joint, that the DIP joint is only 80 degree movement is there, whereas at the fifth joint it goes up to 130 degree. Can you see over here, this movement is only flexion is 90. Here you can see it is only 80 degree. It is not also going 90 degree. But here you can see it has gone more than 90 degree, that it has taken 110 degree. But here DIP joint has taken only 80 degree. But here you can see, now this one, if you can see, the IP joint has crossed 90 degree and gone up to around about 110 to 120 degree. So there you can see the PIP DIP joint flexion range of the fifth PIP DIP joint is more as compared to the first or the second PIP and DIP joint. Fine. So there is a range is there, and which is responsible for this or the increase in range. Now if there is an increase in range, there will be muscles also which are responsible for it. They are called as extrinsic finger flexors. Now why extrinsic? Anything which is arising or originating above from the wrist is called as extrinsic, whether it is extrinsic finger flexors, extrinsic finger extensors. Intrinsic word will be used when the muscle is getting arised or origin of the muscle is below the carpals, then we say it as an intrinsic muscles. So extrinsic, as they say, the finger flexors are there, and you understand we are here in talking about extrinsic finger flexors as FDS and FDP, that is flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus. Now let us see their origin. The flexor digitorum superficialis is arising somewhere from the ulna, anterior surface of ulna, and from the interior surface of ulna it is basically crossing the flexor retinaculum, and in flexor retinaculum when it is crossing, and it is divided into four tendons of all the four fingers, and from all the four fingers it is crossing the MCP, that is carpometacarpal joint, under the volar plates, and dividing into, or it is piercing the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle, and getting inserted in the distal phalanx. Now let us see. Now it is basically moving like this. So what about flexor digitorum superficialis? It is arising from the medial epicondyle, and it is again crossing the flexor retinaculum, dividing into the, it is crossing the flexor retinaculum. Here I have tried to show you is, this is the flexor retinaculum. Can you see this? This is the flexor retinaculum, and here this is basically the flexor pollicis longus and the radial bursa. This is the ulnar bursa. And ulnar bursa, you have seen these dots. These are basically for the tendons. The last four dots was for the flexor digitorum profundus. These four dots are for the flexor digitorum superficialis. The superficial one is for the ring and the little finger, whereas for the deep one is for the second and the third finger, for the second and the third. So you can see the superficial one, and these tendons are, they are crossing the ulnar bursa. The flexor digitorum profundus, the longus is crossing through the radial bursa and then reaching up, whereas the flexor other flexor group of muscles, they are crossing the ulnar bursa. Now what is the importance of bursa over here is, these bursas are basically responsible for a movement or easy gliding movement. There is a gliding mechanism which is happening. The tendons which are crossing in multiple joint, when they are crossing multiple joint, they have to glide smoothly. Otherwise what will happen, there will be pinching or impingement will be there, and there will be again pains and problems will be there. So the bursas basically allowed the slight smooth gliding of these flexor tendon. So it is a separating these tendons and smooth gliding movements. Now whenever there is an infection of ulnar bursa, what will happen is, there will be an hourglass. This, can you see the brown area? The brown area over here shows the ulnar bursa, and where this bursa is going. It is going up till here. Can you see? Whereas the this, and it is also it is continuing here also, which I have not shown because I wanted to show something else also here. So this is all basically the part of ulnar bursa. So whenever there is an infection over here, what will happen is, this arm will be swollen, this part will be swollen, and this will be a narrow part. So this will be an hourglass kind of a swelling will be there, and there will be numbness and on the little finger, numbness in the little finger will be there, and the person will not be able to move the fingers. So this is what is typical ulnar bursa. Okay, this is there is a typical ulnar bursa or infection of ulnar bursa. Whereas the best thing to see is whether it's ulnar bursa is only involved. You check the radial bursa, because FPL, that is the flexor pollicis longus tendon, is free, and this tendon should not be involved in because when the ulnar bursa is infected. Fine. So coming back, you can see the I was telling you about the action of FDS and FDP. Now you see that they are originated from either from the ulna. The FDP is arising from the interior surface of the ulna, and the FDS is arising from the medial epicondyle, and they are making into four tendons, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the FDP, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the FDP, and 2 and 4, that is 2 superior, 1, 2 deep. They are passing through the flexor retinaculum and through this canal. This is called as the carpal tunnel. This carpal tunnel was being formed by the deep transverse carpal ligament, intercarpal ligament, and do you remember the three carpals? That is the transverse carpal ligament. The three carpals, they form the tunnel, and the flexor, these tendons are going beneath this tunnel along with the ulnar bursa, inside the ulnar bursa, and these four tendons are running. They are running, and when they run beneath the volar plate. When they run beneath the volar plate and reaches the MCP joint, they reach beneath the volar plate and reach the MCP joint. At the MCP joint, the FDS tendon divides into two slips, the lateral slips, two lateral slips, and get inserted in the middle phalanx, whereas the FDP pierces this FDS tendon and get inserted at the distal base of the distal phalanx. Therefore, you have this kind of a image over here. Can you see this? This kind of an image is there. Now, if this is the basically origin and insertion of the extensor finger flexors. Now, importance over here is it is responsible for bringing about flexion of what? It is all bringing about the flexion of finger MCP's joint, flexion of PIP joint and DIP joint. Fine. So, this motion, let us talk about the range of motion. The motion is for the FDS, it is a superficial muscles. So, it flexes the MCP joint and the IP joint. But its action is maximum. It produces maximum torque at the MCP joint. It produces more torque at the MCP joint, whereas FDP produce more torque at the IP joint. Remember this is a very important point. It produces maximum torque at the MCP joint. Why so? Greater torque, because when it crosses the MCP joint, it is away from the joint axis. It is far away from the joint axis. So, therefore, it produces maximum torque at round about 30 degree. It produces this torque, and there is maximum force production of MCP. The FDS produces maximum force production of MCP flexion, whereas the flexor digitorum profundus produce maximum torque production at IP. Now, whenever there is a wrist flexion takes place, these two muscles work together. But when they have to work at one joint only, the FDS work very good at the MCP, whereas the FDP works very good at the IP joint. Fine. Now, you can go through these slides. These slides are whatever I have explained you verbally. Fine. So, now what is basically I want to teach you here is the gliding mechanism. Now, the gliding mechanism of the finger flexors, that is the action of finger flexors. The action of finger flexors depends upon two things. One is the position of wrist. You also know about active and passive insufficiency. You understand, since the FDS and FDP are moving multiple joints, they are crossing multiple joints. So therefore, it is required that the position of wrist plays a very crucial role in the function of FDS and FDP. You understand that when you flex your wrist, and it is very difficult to make a fist, whereas when you extend your wrist, it is very easy to make the fist. So you understand that. So that is the position of wrist is very much important. The second is the gliding mechanism. Now, what is gliding mechanism? Gliding at the flexor retinaculum, gliding at the radial and the ulnar bursa, and gliding under these sheaths. We will be talking about this. Now, this is very important. That is, we have already talked about the flexor retinaculum, this the carpal tunnel, how it passes beneath the carpal tunnel, and along with the ulnar bursa. It is divided into two parts, the superficial and the deep part. Two tendons work superficially, two tendon goes deep, and they come into this distal tendon sheaths. When they run into the distal tendon sheaths, they pass into this volar plates. There are volar plates are there. Now, if you can see this diagram, this is the volar plate. Now, when they are underneath the volar plate, they are crossing the volar plate, and it divides into two. The FDS divides into two lateral slips and then get inserted in the middle phalanx, whereas the FDP is basically crossing and piercing the FDS tendon and getting inserted in the distal IP joint. Fine. So, they play a very crucial role in it. What crucial role is? Now, to make sure that they are running properly, there is certain kind of ligaments and lateral bands are there. These are called as the angular as well as the cruciate pulleys. The angular pulleys are also called as diurnal ligaments, and there is these are, can you see these lines? There are 5 angular pulleys. I want to show you the one at the base of the proximal phalanx, one at the middle of the proximal phalanx, third is at the distal or at the one is at the head, the body, the base, then again the middle shaft and the distal end of the middle phalanx. So there are 5 annular pulleys, and the cross one is the cruciate pulleys. So these pulleys are between the A2, if I say A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, between A2 to A3 there is one pulley, A3 to A4 there is another pulley, and A4 to A5 there is another pulley. So these basically, they are holding the FDS and FDP tendon here. Now when they are holding this FDP and FDS tendon, they don't allow the bowstringing action to take place, because they are holding this FDS tendon, and they provide the proper gliding motion of the FDS. Because what will happen is, whenever you make a fist, or whenever you make because this is, hand is made for mobility, hand is not made, it is also made for stability, but it is more for the mobility and manipulation tasks. So chances of getting displaced, these tendons getting displaced, is very high. So they have been holded here. Here they have been holded by the flexor retinaculum, here they have been holded by the tendon sheaths, here they have been holded by the volar ligaments, and here they have been holded by the cruciate and the annular pulleys, so that they can function very properly. Now the very important function of these cruciate or these pulleys is that they allow maximum efficiency or force production also, because if they are passing very nicely, they will be producing their maximum force also at each joint. So it is playing a very crucial role over here. Fine, you can go through all this in this PPT. Fine, and they are very important in holding this. Now this figure I just wanted to show you. Can you see this A1, A1, A2, A1, A2, A3, A4, A5? Can you see this? And these are the cruciate pulleys. Can you see this? These are the cruciate pulleys which are there. Okay, so they are holding, in whenever the position of the finger may be, they are basically holding the FDS and FDP tendon, so that they can function very nicely. So there is you can see the volar plates. Can you see the volar plates are there? The base is having the volar plates, and there is also collateral ligaments. The collateral ligaments at the joints. Now this is the first MCP joint, then there is a middle IP joints are there, which is also been holded by the collateral plates on the radial and the medial side. You are aware of that. Then there is also some kind of oblique reticular bands, ligaments are also there for holding these ligaments. So there are all these segments are there to hold the FDS and FDP. Fine. So this, what is the function of this is for the maximum efficiency. Can you see this? For the maximum efficiency or excursion, and avoid bowstringing, and amount of bowstringing is avoided, and it holds the flexor tendon together. Fine. So this is the main function of these pulleys. Fine. Now the extrinsic finger flexor. This is about the extrinsic finger flexors. Now we have also got the extrinsic finger extensors. This is extensor retinaculum. Can you see? This is extensor retinaculum, and finger extensors are basically extensor digitorum. Along with this, we have extensor indicis and extensor digiti minimi. So these are the 3 tendons which forms the finger extensors. Fine. Now these basically goes from the extensor retinaculum, and when they goes from the extensor retinaculum, and they basically run into the each finger. This forms the extensor hood. This is basically the extensor hood, and since we had volar plates on the volar side or the palmar side, we had extensor hood on the dorsal side. Now the extensor hood is again at the MCP joint, or at the MCP, which is holding this extensor tendon, extensor digitorum tendon, and along with this extensor indicis tendon. So it is holding here, and this tendon itself, you can see, if you can see for yourself, is dividing into 2 parts, the brown line. Can you see it is dividing into 2 lateral slips, and these 2 lateral slips are getting attached to the distal end. Then there is also a central slip which is also going directly to the distal base of the DIP joint. Can you see this? There is 2 lateral lips as well as the central slip is there. Fine. So this is basically the extensor finger pathway. Fine. So they are arising, or they are passing through the extensor retinaculum, passing through the extensor hood, and then they are also getting inserted at the distal DIP joint. So herein you can see the image. What I wanted to show you, if you are not clear with this, you can see this is the extensor retinaculum, and these are the tendon sheets. Now for extensor retinaculum, they are divided into 4 sheets, and you can these tendons are basically passing through. These are all the tendons. They are passing through beneath this extensor retinaculum. There is another one for the extensor pollicis or extensor indicis, extensor disti minimi. So these are the 4. Can you see the 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4 tendons which are passing through? Fine. And which are running beneath the extensor retinaculum, and herein there is extensor hoods are there. Herein extensor hoods are there, and it is dividing into 2 lips, that is the 2 lateral, and 1 is going in between. Fine. So this is how the formation is there. So it has got a central tendon which gets inserted at the base of the middle phalanx, and 2 lateral bands which joins the terminal tendon. So extensor hood is divided into 3 bands. Fine. So if this is another picture for the same, so it allows basically these tendons, it allows the extension at the, MCP joint and flexion and extension at the IP joint. So this finger extensors are bringing about extension of wrist, extension of MCP and extension of the IP joint. So if you can see this image again, you will be able to see is these are the tendons which are crossing. This is the extensor hood, and here is the 2 lateral lips, that is, and this is the central one which is crossing. Fine. So this is inserting at the distal end. Here there are other ligaments also. This is a triangular basically ligament over here which is holding it, and we will be talking about it. There are collateral ligaments which are holding it. There is sagittal bands which are holding it with the volar plate. So these all are the ligaments which are holding it, and for the efficiency, this for the improving the efficiency of the extensor mechanism. So what is the extensor mechanism? That is the EDC and extensor indicis, extensor digitorum, extensor hood, the central tendon, the lateral bands and the terminal tendon. They all are the extensor mechanisms. They all are extensor mechanisms, and they have been stabilized by the triangular ligament I showed you here at the distal part or the dorsal part of the DIP joint. Then there are sagittal bands, which are sagittal bands are the bands. The volar plates are giving it to the extensor hoods. Okay. And then there is again deep transverse metacarpal ligament. Here also you are having deep transverse metacarpal ligaments which prevents bowstringing of the extensor group. Then there is also dorsal and volar interossei and the lumbrical muscles. They also play a very crucial part of the extensor. This is the muscles, that is the extensor digitorum, extensor indicis and extensor disti minimi. But there are intrinsic muscles also which are a part of extensor mechanism, which are the dorsal and interossei, volar interossei and the lumbrical muscles. Fine. You understand how these ligaments are passive components. This is a triangular ligament. There are sagittal bands, sagittal volar attaching with the volar plate so that they can secure it properly. Then there is a transverse metacarpal ligament which is holding it. Of course, there is an extensor retinaculum which is also holding it. There is other muscles also which are called as intrinsic finger muscles, which also become a part of the extensor retinaculum or the extensor mechanism, which is the dorsal and the volar interossei muscle. Now the dorsal and the volar interossei, if you can understand, there are 4 in number. That is, there is 4 dorsal interossei and 3 to 4 volar interossei. Now they are able to produce is, these interossei are arising from the metacarpals and the tendons. Basically they are arising from the metacarpals and from the if I can say, the body of the metacarpals, and if they are arising from here, they are responsible for bringing about abduction and adduction at the MCP joint. Fine. So if we can see that these are these muscles, they are arising from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th metacarpal, body of the metacarpal, and then they are getting divided into 2 branches. One is getting inserted with the proximal one is the proximal branch which is getting inserted at the MCP, that is at the extensor hood, just proximal phalanx and the extensor hood. The other is moving distally and getting attached to the lateral lips as well as the central tendon. So there are two branches to the interossei. One interossei branch is which is getting origined at the second, third and fourth and fifth metacarpals. They are basically running proximal tendon which goes and inserts with the MCP joint before at the proximal phalanx at the extensor hood. The distal one is going at the lateral hip and the lips and the band and the central tendon. Fine. So they are basically responsible. Dorsal has got both the branches, that is the dorsal interossei. They are basically the proximal branch as well as the distal branch. So as you can understand, so the dorsal will have an action at the MCP joint as well as at the IP joint. Fine. So the dorsal is helping in extension as well as what kind of an action. So dorsal is responsible for abduction and adduction. So what is happening over here is, now it brings about, when the MCP is in extension, the dorsal interossei brings about the abduction and adduction movement. But when the MCP is in flexion, it cannot produce this abduction and adduction movement. So this is the action of the dorsal interossei. That is when the MCP, that is metacarpophalangeal joint, is in extension, it brings about adduction and abduction movement. Whereas when it comes into flexion, and this dorsal interossei moves volarly and it produces maximum force. It helps in producing maximum force. It's bringing about MCP flexion. So it cannot work since it is this is basically acting at two joints. So it cannot be efficient at two joints. So it cannot produce action at the of abduction and adduction. So it is only producing MCP flexion. So when it is asked to produce MCP flexion, it will produce only MCP flexion and it cannot produce the second function of abduction and adduction. But when in extension, it is able to produce abduction and adduction at MCP joint. So you can see if the volar muscles, that is which are arising on the volar side of the again from the are basic arising from the volar side, they are only having the distal attachment. They work only at the distal attachment. Fine. So at that point, that is that they are not having any attachment proximally. So they are basically used for bringing about IP extension. IP extension is brought about by the interossei. So you can see over here, you can go through this role of interossei in MCP flexion, as well as you can go through this in MCP extension. You can go through this, and how these interossei are basically the volar interossei as well are responsible for bringing about the IP extension. The both are they work together. The distal part of the tendon of this interossei, they work for the IP extension movement. So they are responsible for IP extension and bringing about MCP abduction adduction during MCP extension movement. Fine. So this is the role. You can see over here how they are arising, the dorsal and the palmar interossei, how they are arising and they are moving up. But what happens by the lumbricals? The lumbricals also play a very crucial role in extensor mechanism, but this is a muscle which is arising from the FDP tendon. Now you remember, this is an FDP tendon which was running. The FDP tendon, it arises from the FDP tendon. So only muscle which is arising from the tendon of a muscle, that is from the FDP tendon. So it is arising from the volar side, and then it is crossing this deep transverse MCP ligament, and then it is crossing, that is it is on the volar side, and then it crosses and reaches on the dorsal side of the IP joint. So that is, it crosses and moves up, and then it goes into the extensor hood and extensor mechanism, being a branch part of the lateral band of the extensor mechanism. So it is a muscle which arises from the FDP and it runs beneath the volar plates and piercing the transverse metacarpal ligament, and then moves behind and become a part of extensor mechanism and reaches the lateral band and goes along with the radial side and get inserted along with the distal part of the base of the DIP joint. So this is responsible for bringing about MCP flexion and IP extension. This is the muscle which is responsible for bringing about the extension of MCP joint and the flexion of MCP joint and extension of IP joint. Fine. So there is a difference between the role of interossei and the difference between the role of lumbricals. The interossei brings about the extension of MCP along with the abduction and adduction. It also brings about flexion of MCP, but when there is a flexion of MCP, it is not able to bring about the second function. Second function, that what is that? IP extension. It cannot bring about that. It can purely bring about IP extension when the distal part is working. When with extension, it can bring about IP joint extension. But with flexion, it cannot bring about the abduction adduction movement or any flexion movement or extension movement of the fingers. This is brought about by lumbricals. Lumbricals bring about flexion of the MCP joint and extension of the IP joint. Fine. So that is why lumbricals play a very crucial role in the. Can you see over here? I wanted to show this image. Can you see? It is arising from the FDP tendon, and from the FDP tendon it is going. You can see the volar crossing the volar plate, and then it is moving. And it is moving over here, that is from the radial side, it is moving up and crossing and then reaching up. Fine. So it is volar, from the volar side it has come and it is going up. This is the role. This is the role. So it brings about, can you see if it is crossing this MCP anteriorly, so it is bringing about flexion of this movement at the MCP, and when it is crossing behind the IP, it is bringing about extension torque at IP. Fine. Fine. Now let us see the thumb. The thumb is basically carpometacarpal joint. I wanted to teach you about this first carpometacarpal joint, and this is a very important joint because it has been formed between the trapezium and the base or the head of the first metacarpal. It's a saddle variety of a joint which allows 2 degrees of motion. Ideally it allows circumduction, all the 3 degrees of motion, but we say it allows only 2 degrees of motion. That is the flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and opposition is the net effect of all the motions. So we cannot say it's a kind of a ball and socket variety of a joint, but it is a saddle variety of a joint. But it allows only 2 degrees of motion, and opposition is the combination of these motion only. So it is not a 3 degree motion, or 3 degree motion is not there. Fine. So it's a saddle variety of a joint where its trapezium is concave, and at sagittal plane you get is abduction and adduction. This movement is there, and when the convex part of the trapezium works in the frontal plane, where we get is flexion and extension part. This is flexion and extension part. That is the spherical shape portion of trapezium is convex in all the direction. The base of the first metacarpal is reciprocal shape to that of the trapezium. Okay, so flexion and extension and abduction and adduction occurs in sagittal in the saddle surface, flexion at the sagittal plane and AP axis, and abduction adduction at frontal plane and coronal axis. Now you can see over here there are the movement is when it is taking place in abduction to adduction movement, the convex part of I can say the head is moving. The convex part of the head is moving, and the rolling and the gliding will take place opposite to that of the osteokinematics. And so if I can say abduction is moving away from the midline, or moving away from the midline of the palm or the plane, this is called abduction. So here in the rolling will be posteriorly. Here you can see the rolling is posteriorly, whereas the gliding is anteriorly. The rolling is posteriorly, the gliding is anteriorly, whereas here you can see the rolling is anteriorly, whereas gliding is posteriorly for the case of adduction. Now what happens in flexion to extension? What is happening is the movement is in the same direction to that of the concave part of the trapezium is moving. So we are following osteokinematics same as that of the arthrokinematics, and here you can see is during flexion the rolling is taking place. The rolling, if you can say, the rolling is taking place anteriorly, and wherein and medially. The rolling is taking place anteriorly and medially, and the sliding is also taking place anteriorly and medially, whereas in extension the rolling is taking place posteriorly and laterally, and the gliding also taking place laterally. Fine, this is the movement you have to understand, and it is a site of degeneration, because you can see for the physiotherapist who is working on with the help of these two fingers, the chances of CMC joint inflammation or OA changes are large. So you have to keep in mind it cannot take high loads, so all kind of manipulative techniques need to have different hand positions so that they are in a lax position or they are relaxed. Fine, so it has got various kind of ligaments to support. There are about anterior ligament, posterior ligament, capsular ligaments are there, oblique ligaments to stabilize the CMC joint. Fine, and it is very much important for the prehension. All kind of prehension movements are done by the CMC joint. Then we have called the MCP joint of the first, and again in the MCP joint of the first is a condylar variety of a joint, and which allows flexion to extension and abduction adduction movement, as we have explained it earlier. So it allows these 4 degrees of movement also in the first MCP joint. Fine, the IP it has got only one IP joint along with the and its function is same as the others one. So these are the extensor group of muscles of the thumb. That is, you can say for the flexion movement, it is opponens flex and flexor pollicis longus and opponens pollicis which is working. Extension is brought about by the extensor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis. Adduction is brought about by adduction pollicis. Abduction is brought about by abduction pollicis longus, abduction pollicis brevis. So these are the all muscles which are you should know what is the action of these muscles. Fine. Now what about the prehensions? Prehension is basically the function of hand. The function of hand is divided into basically 2 parts. It is power grip, that is full hand prehension, and it has got precision grip. Power, that is grasp function, and another is where the whole part or whole surface, volar surface or whole palmar surface is coming in contact with an object, whereas precision is for the manipulation part, where only a part of the fingers or the hand is taken part into the manipulation. Fine, so there is different functions or different phases of power grip and precision grip which you can go through. I am just giving you an idea about it. There are cylindrical grips, spherical grips, hook grip, lateral prehension, pinch grip which is there. Fine, so lateral prehension is like this, which we try to hold a pencil or open a lock. These are the grips. You can go through this and you will be getting an idea how the movement of the joints takes place in cylindrical, spherical, hook grip, lateral prehensions. And what happens in precision handling is pad to pad prehension, which we take to take out small rounds or small blocks. And it is tip to tip when we write. It is in 3-point chuck position is used when we use for writing, or when we use pad to tab when we are opening a lock. We basically use pad and the side of the index finger for that, and we also use tip to tip when we have to just lift a needle from the floor, so we are using the tip also. So these are the different kind of pad to pad prehension, tip to tip prehension, side to side prehension. Now what is the functional position of the hand? When the wrist is slightly extended to 20 degree and ulnar deviated to 10 degree. Fine, it should be extended and ulnar deviated, and the finger should be, MCP should be 45 degree flexed, and the PIP should be 30 degree flexed. That is, it is the position. This is the position which we basically give it for the cock-up split, for the static cock-up. We basically put it in this position. This is also called as the this is very functional position of the wrist and hand, which we give it in the static cock-up splits also. Thank you.